This is Euronews Tonight. Here are your headlines. Emmanuel Macron's shuttle diplomacy continues as the French president meets with his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky, saying he sees concrete solutions to reducing tensions. A day on from Russian President Putin's marathon talks with Macron, the Kremlin rejects reports that the two leaders had reached any sort of agreement. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson faces fresh calls to withdraw false statements made about opposition leader Keir Starmer after he was targeted by protesters outside of Parliament.
German authorities investigate hundreds of cases of hate speech directed at the police after 2 officers were killed last week.
And the Oscar nominations are in, with The Power of the Dog leading the pack. I'm Helena Humphrey. It is good to have you with us. French President Emmanuel Macron says a de-escalation of tensions between Russia and Ukraine is possible following meetings with both leaders in the last 48 hours. Well, Macron met President Zelensky in Kiev after holding lengthy talks with President Putin in Moscow on Monday. The French president says both leaders have committed to honouring the Minsk Accords, a 2014 agreement that sought to end the conflict between Russian-backed separatists and government forces in eastern Ukraine. But Macron stressed that more dialogue was needed in order to bring about peace.
On the basis of this double commitment, Russian and Ukrainian, we now have the opportunity to move these negotiations forward. A lot of time has been wasted in questioning this or that format and this or that method of negotiation. I believe that it is now time for all the participants in these negotiations to engage in a dialogue in good faith. And the path is possible, and we are willing, as far as Germany and France are concerned, to accompany you on this path.
Well, in relation to adhering to the Minsk agreement, President Putin told the Ukrainian leader that he'd have to, like it or not, but would have to bear with it, my beauty. President Zelensky responded, saying that his country is showing restraint and dignity.
Ukraine is very patient because it's very wise. I think it's very important, not only for Ukraine, but also for all of Europe and for Russians, because the escalation depends on our patience. Escalation is coming from the other side. We protect our country. We are in our territory. Our patience has an impact on provocations when we don't respond to it, but behave with great dignity.
And our international correspondent Annalise Borges joins us now. She is in Popasna in eastern Ukraine. Welcome to you. Good evening, Annalise. Good to see you. To begin with, do we have now a better idea of those proposals that Macron put on the table when he was in Moscow yesterday?
Hi there. Well, it's been quite interesting to note just how much the perception of what was achieved in that meeting has evolved throughout the day. First, we got a word from Macron's team that he had indeed gotten assurances by the Russian president that the Russian troops stationed in Belarus would be returning home. That information was later denied by the Kremlin, that said that was part of the plan all along, that Russian troops will return after those joint military exercises with Belarus, and that was nothing new, that was not part of any kind of achievement from that meeting. And a few moments ago, we've heard from France's president saying that that was just a misunderstanding. Journalists got his point wrong. What he was very happy about with regards to yesterday's meeting in Moscow was the fact that they started a process of de-escalation and of rebuilding of trust. Emmanuel Macron said that there are 2 issues here that are going to have to be worked out in parallel. One is, of course, the de-escalation with regards to the current buildup of tensions, with regards to the current buildup of troops on the other side of the border. But of course, he says the important aspect is to remember that there is an ongoing conflict that needs to be sorted, that those talks within the Normandy format, those talks around the Minsk agreements, they need to continue. He insisted that this process is not going to happen overnight. He said that if people were expecting a breakthrough in one meeting, they were, of course, wrong to expect that is going to be a lengthy process. But that is better than nothing. And of course, what he did basically here is that he's buying more time, not only for Europe, but also for Russia. It's going to be interesting to see just how much that evolves over the next few days. That meeting in Moscow was questioned here in Ukraine today during those talks with President Zelensky. But so far, Emmanuel Macron, who's basically representing the whole of Europe, remains optimistic that a process has started, a process that will eventually, he hopes at least, will lead towards peace and stability for this region.
Annelies, crucially, I have to ask you, do we have any sense about what the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky makes about all of this? Because after all, some of these ideas, proposals, statements, they're about his country.
Well, Volodymyr Zelensky once again thanked Emmanuel Macron for his continuous support. This is the first visit by a French head of state to Ukraine in 24 years, and a visit at a moment like this actually counts. He was once again very careful with his words. You heard there earlier him talking about patience, saying that his country was actually very resilient and would stand firm with regards to its positions. But of course, he also mentioned that it was very important to have the continuous support from the West right now. Words will matter as much as actions, and Volodymyr Zelensky knows that. He also knows that his country stands the most to lose here if there was a full-fledged war, if Russian troops and Russian tanks were indeed to roll out through these streets. But what is perhaps even more interesting to note is just how all those different initiatives of diplomacy have been perceived here. I'm standing right now in the Donbass region in the east part of Ukraine. This region has been facing a conflict for the past 8 years. It has been suffering with that conflict, a conflict that has claimed more than 14,000 lives. It has displaced over 1 million people. People here have been feeling a mixture of skepticism and resentment. Zelensky mentioned there the importance of cooperation in the future with regards also to financial aid, not only military aid. And that was something that was brought up here today. Throughout the day, I've been asking people whether or not they knew that Emmanuel Macron was in Kiev, whether or not they knew that there was all this diplomatic activity going on. And they said, yes, we've heard that the entire world is watching Ukraine right now. But honestly, they have all but forgotten the conflict that we've been experiencing. And with regards to aid, quite a few people here told me that that aid never really reaches them, that they are struggling. One woman said that she is more afraid of not being able to feed her family than she is of Russian troops on the other side of the border.
Very important point to make. Annelies Borges there in eastern Ukraine for us. Annelies, thanks a lot. Well, one day on from those 5-hour talks, a 6-course dinner, and the dust is settling. So let's go straight over now to our Russia analyst, Galina Polonskaya. Galina, good to see you. We heard the Kremlin saying yesterday, quote, that there were seeds of reason in the proposals that Macron brought to Moscow. Today, though, from the Kremlin saying no agreement's been reached between the two leaders. In the cold light of day, has the tone changed?
Well, if you listen to the Kremlin, to the state media, there is no euphoria for sure. One of the top Kremlin journalists described this press conference on air, and he said that he understood from the very beginning that something went wrong. He spoke about Vladimir Putin, who was very, as he said, firm and clear, and spoke about Russia's red lines, and also journalists mentioned how Putin addressed a French journalist asking him whether France wanted a war with Russia in case if Ukraine becomes a member of NATO and decides to take Crimea back by force. And this same journalist also said that he thought that Emmanuel Macron was very, very vague, so quite a moderate description. And of course, everyone is trying to guess what both leaders were talking exactly about behind those closed doors for 5 hours. And apparently, according to the state media, Vladimir Putin invited Emmanuel Macron for 15 more minutes for some talks. And the Kremlin spokesman said indeed that there was no any deal on Ukraine made by Presidents Putin and Macron. Yesterday he was asked about the potential meeting between Mr. Putin and Zelensky, and he said that the Russian president was ready to meet with anyone who could help to cut this Gordian knot. That's how he described what is happening in the east of Ukraine. And he said that Moscow needs to know exactly what would be the outcome of such a meeting, and apparently it is not very persuaded at this point.
Briefly, if you would, Galina, we've also heard today from the Russian Defence Ministry that it's sending 6 landing craft capable of carrying thousands of troops to waters off Ukraine. Some questions asked if Putin's actually buying time as he readies for an invasion. Briefly, if you would.
Well, those questions are rising indeed, but we heard that Emmanuel Macron said that the main goal was achieved, that there is no escalation going on, and Vladimir Putin did say about the compromise that he was willing to make. There are, of course, those movements of the ships, and there are drills in Belarus that start in 2 days. But it's too early to make any conclusions. The diplomacy is going on. Emmanuel Macron is meeting with Olaf Scholz tonight, and the Chancellor of Germany is coming to Russia. And after Macron will speak with Vladimir Putin again, and some independent Russian journalists right now say that any talks are good at this point, because when people are talking, as they say, the guns stay silent.
All right, Galina Polanskaya, thank you so much. Well, German authorities have documented hundreds of cases of hate speech directed at the police over the past week after the killing of 2 officers on duty. And Matthew and our team in the Cube have been taking a look.
Helen, the police say they have identified a total of 399 posts containing online hate speech, all related to last week's fatal shooting of 2 police officers. It was a crime that's been described as a brutal and cowardly murder. But now officials say that some people in Germany have been celebrating these killings, while others have mocked the victims. This is a selection of the online posts that they are examining, sent to my colleague Catherine here in the Cube. Take a look at some of the language that's being used here. This person says here, "Congratulations to the perpetrator. Only a dead police officer is a good one. We should all follow this example." Investigators say that more than 100 of these kind of posts are criminally relevant, and they say they've so far identified at least 15 suspects. Last week's shooting in the town of Kusel certainly shocked a lot of people in Germany. 2 suspects have been arrested after they reportedly opened fire on the officers after being caught with illegally poached animals in their vehicle. But now there is even more shock in Germany that some people seem to be celebrating these killings, and investigators have reiterated they will come down hard on those responsible. And Helena, the police have also told Euronews that they are working with the social media platforms as well to make sure that any of those online hate speech posts are removed as soon as their investigation is complete.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson will not apologise for using false accusations against the opposition Labour Party leader Keir Starmer that led him to being targeted by protesters outside of Parliament. Well, Starmer needed a police escort to leave the House of Commons on Monday as angry demonstrators confronted him. The attack on the Labour Party leader has been widely condemned, but many have laid the blame for the incident on the Prime Minister and the language that was used in Parliament last week. Well, let's cross straight now to Tig Enright, who is in London for us. Good to see you, Tig. To begin with, we know that calls are growing from inside Johnson's own party to either withdraw those comments or apologise, or both. But what is the word from Downing Street?
Hi, Helena. The answer is no. It has to be said, pressure has been mounting on Johnson for an apology long before the mobbing attack on Monday night, ever since he made those comments in Parliament last week, suggesting that Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, at a time when he was the country's top prosecutor, chose not to prosecute a high-profile television presenter from the 70s and 80s by the name of Jimmy Savile, who it turned out was a prolific child abuser. Johnson has resisted calls to apologise for those comments. He's trotted out loyal ministers to defend his comments. He chose only under pressure to clarify his comments at a later point, saying that Starmer was not personally responsible for the decision, but he has not apologised. And of course, the longer he continues to refuse to do so, the harder it would be for him to climb down and change his mind. So the message from Downing Street is that his condemnation of the attack on Keir Starmer that he made on social media shortly after the event is as far as he's going to go. But as you say, he has not only been widely criticised from outside of his Conservative Party, but also within his Conservative Party. Limited public criticism from his own MPs. It is largely from the same individuals who've already been calling for him to resign in recent weeks over the separate scandal about parties being held in Downing Street during the coronavirus lockdowns. But what those MPs are saying is pretty much in line with the public's mood. An opinion poll released in the last few hours by an organisation called Comres suggests that 69% of the general public believe that Boris Johnson's comments were responsible or caused that attack on Keir Starmer on Monday night. They've called on him to do so. And that's pretty much the same number who told the same pollsters a week earlier that they wanted Boris Johnson to resign over those parties held during lockdown. Helena?
Tig, as you mentioned there, coming off the back of an already turbulent week, one which has seen resignations, appointments, now, today, a mini reshuffle. Will that be enough to calm the pressure on Johnson right now?
Doubtful, I'd say. You say a turbulent week. It's really been a turbulent couple of months ever since those allegations of COVID parties started emerging. He's been trying his best to move on from the scandal, even though the investigations into it, a police investigation, still loom over him. As you say, the latest tactic is a reshuffle within his cabinet. It has to be said they're all pretty low-level jobs which have been reshuffled. He wouldn't want to shake things up too much with his senior team, lest any of them have a knife held behind their back, ready to signal their lack of confidence in him and seek to replace him. He's also been replacing some of the aides, the policy advisors who resigned towards the end of last week. Now, he's portraying this as his effort to clean up the Downing Street operation. This was what Boris Johnson promised as his response to the COVID lockdown parties scandal. But it's easy to see why some people would see it as more like rearranging deck chairs in the Titanic. Helena?
All right, Tig Enright in London this evening. Tig, thank you so much. Day 4 of the Beijing Winter Olympics has come to an end with golds for France and Germany, but it was a home favourite who snatched the headlines, and Rebecca Daunt has more.
Freestyle ski champion Elaine Hu pulled off an epic performance in front of her adoring Chinese fans. The 18-year-old landed a stunning double cork 1620 to beat France's Tess Ledoux before taking home the gold. However, France did have something to celebrate when World Cup leader Quentin Fillon-Maillet bounced back from 2 misses on the shooting range for victory in the men's individual 20 km gold medal at the Beijing Olympics after another action-packed race. German luger Natalie Heisenberger, the most decorated female luge athlete in history, claimed an unprecedented 3rd consecutive women's singles title, while her compatriot Anna Berreiter, who came in just 0.49 seconds slower, came second. And in curling, Italian duo Amos Mazzana and Stefania Constantini overwhelmed their Swedish opponents 8-1 in 7 ends in the semi-final and drew loud cheers from their supporters after cruising to victory. Austria's Matthias Mayer made history by retaining his Olympic Super G title as the first men's alpine skier to win gold medals in 3 consecutive games. While Esther Ledecky is on course for a unique Winter Olympics double after retaining her women's snowboard parallel slalom title. All in all, another exciting day in Beijing, which has pushed Sweden to the top of the leaderboard with 4 gold medals. Rebecca Daunt, Euronews.
The Oscar nominations are out as the countdown begins for the most anticipated night in Hollywood. Jane Campion is up for Best Director for Power of the Dog, which received an impressive 12 nominations. Kenneth Branagh's autobiographical film Belfast scored 7. Well, to talk us through the potential winners, we're joined by film critic Kaleem Aftab. Welcome to you. Good to see you, Kaleem. To begin with, talking about directing in those nominations, we've got some big hitters there. Spielberg, Kenneth Branagh, Paul Thomas Anderson. It seems like they've gone with the tried and tested.
They've gone with the tried and tested, but you've got to remember, after 2 years of the pandemic, last year the Oscar show did not get that many viewers. They're really going for, we are big, we are back, we are the Oscars that you know. We have Jane Campion. We have also changed our format. We have female directors in there. We have a Japanese director in there with Ryushiki Hamaguchi. But we also have Paul Thomas Anderson, Spielberg, and Kenneth Branagh. This, I think, will be a huge Oscars show.
There's also been 10 nominations for Best Film this year in the Equity and Inclusion Initiative. In terms of representation, then, how have they fared?
I think they're very good. I think this is going to be the model for the future of Oscars. They've got one foreign language film, obviously following on from the delightful win of Parasite a couple of years ago. They've got films directed by women. They've got a surprise film in Coda. They also have the huge films that we mentioned, the West Side Stories, the Belfast, The Power of the Dog, June, which also had 10 nominations. And Don't Look Up. It's going to be a huge Oscar night.
You mentioned Parasite. I wanted to touch on it briefly because we've got Drive My Car, which is up for Best International Feature and Best Picture as well. And I did have to wonder when I saw that whether it could possibly reach the heights of Parasite in 2019.
I'm not sure it will quite reach the heights of Parasite because obviously that was one of the biggest box office Cannes sensations of that year. Whereas Drive My Car is more of a critical favorite. It's a 3-hour drama that's very Chekhovian that is adapted from a Murakami book. It's very stylish. It's very well made. It's one for cinephiles. It's definitely the cinephile's choice. Whereas Parasite really did branch out into the mainstream and was watched by everybody in all cinemas around the world. So I don't think it's quite there. I think it's a shoe-in for Best International Feature. I think the Best Picture and the director nods are probably as good as it gets. I think it's going to be a Power of the Dog versus Belfast night myself.
All right, Kaleem Aftab, running us through those nominations. Kaleem, thank you so much. You're up to date. That's the latest. This is Euronews Tonight. I'll see you soon. Bye for now.